My girlfriend announced at Easter dinner. We're moving to Paris. I already applied for a job there. In front of my entire family. It was the first I'd heard of it. I said, Bon voyage. Then I smiled at my mom, finished my dinner, and drove her to the airport with her suitcases that same week. When she realized she was flying solo, I, 29 male, am a forensic accountant. That basically means I spend my days unraveling financial messes, and I strongly prefer the quiet predictability of spreadsheets and routine over any kind of real-life drama. I had been living with my girlfriend for nearly 3 years. She was a complete opposite of me. She was loud, aggressively spontaneous, and constantly chasing a highly curated aesthetic for her social media profiles. For a long time, I actually thought we balanced each other out perfectly. I provided the stability and the grounding, while she provided the energy and the excitement. I could not have been more wrong. It all started on Easter Sunday. My mother had spent 2 solid days preparing her traditional holiday dinner. The dining room was packed with my family. My father, my older brother, his pregnant wife, and my mother were all seated around the big mahogany table. The house smelled amazing, like roasted lamb and rosemary. We were passing the mashed potatoes and chatting about completely normal, mundane things. It was an entirely average, peaceful afternoon, until my girlfriend tapped her butter knife against her crystal wine glass. The conversation at the table completely died down. My father looked up, mid-bite. My mother smiled warmly, clearly expecting a pregnancy announcement or maybe even an engagement. My girlfriend stood up, smoothed down her pastel spring dress, and beamed at my family. I have some incredible news, she announced, her voice pitched high with performative, camera-ready excitement. We are moving to Paris. I already applied for a job there, got it, and we leave this Thursday. The silence that followed was so heavy it actually felt suffocating. I just stared at her. The words scrambled in my head. Paris? Thursday? I looked across the table at my brother, who was staring right back at me with wide, confused eyes. I looked back at my girlfriend. She was holding her glass up, just waiting for the cheers and the applause. Paris. I repeated. My voice was completely flat. Yes, Paris. She clapped her hands together. It is a massive step up for my marketing career. We are going to get a flat near the Marais. It is going to be so incredibly romantic. It was the very first time I had heard a single syllable about any of this. I had a mortgage here. I had a demanding career here. I had an entire life that I had carefully built over a decade, and she had just casually informed my entire family that I was abandoning all of it in 4 days. I looked at the absolute joy on her face, and it suddenly clicked. It was not the joy of shared success. It was the joy of a stage director who had just forced a lead actor into the spotlight without a script. She was weaponizing my family. She thought that by announcing it in front of them, I would be forced to just smile, nod, and play along to avoid making a scene. She thought my natural social anxiety would override my common sense. I slowly set my fork down on the table. I picked up my water glass. Bon voyage, I said. I took a sip of water, turned to my mother, and smiled. Mom, the lamb is incredible this year. Could you pass the mint jelly? My girlfriend's smile completely shattered. Her arm, which was still raised with a wine glass, slowly lowered to her side. What do you mean? Bon voyage, she asked, her voice dropping a performative cheer and taking on a sharp edge. I mean, have a great trip, I said, not even looking at her. I spooned a small amount of jelly onto my plate. I have a massive quarterly audit starting on Friday. I will not be going to France. We are doing this, she hissed, gripping the edge of the dining table so hard her knuckles turned white. I already accepted the offer. Congratulations on the new job, my father chimed in. His tone was entirely neutral, but his eyes were locked onto her with a stern, cold judgment. My dad is a retired contractor. He does not miss a trick. He knew exactly what she had just tried to pull. Pass the rolls, please. The rest of the dinner was an absolute masterclass in awkwardness. My girlfriend sat in rigid, furious silence, glaring at her plate while my family flawlessly ignored the radioactive tension radiating from her chair. I ate my dinner, complimented my mother on the dessert, and then politely excused us. I knew the car ride home was going to be bad. I just didn't realize it was going to be the absolute end of my life as I knew it. The exact moment the doors of my SUV closed, the screaming started. "How dare you humiliate me in front of your parents?" she shrieked, slamming her hands against the dashboard. "You made me look like an absolute idiot in there." "You made yourself look like an idiot," I replied calmly, keeping my eyes firmly on the road. "You made a unilateral life decision, kept it a massive secret, and then tried to corner me in front of my entire family. What on earth did you think was going to happen? I thought you would support me. I am your partner. You make really good money. You can work remotely or just quit and find a remote gig. It is Paris." Her entitlement was suffocating. It filled the car like carbon monoxide. "I am an accountant, not a travel blogger," I said. "I cannot just quit my firm and move to Europe on 4 days' notice. When did you even apply for this job?" 2 months ago, she snapped, crossing her arms tightly over her chest. "And I already signed the lease of the flat." I hit the brakes slightly, shocked. "You signed a lease? In France? How?" "They require extensive financial documentation to rent to foreigners." She waved her hand dismissively, looking out the passenger window. "I just submitted your bank statements and your tax returns with mine. I told the agency we were married." My blood ran cold. "You sent my personal, highly sensitive financial documents to a foreign real estate agency without my consent." "Oh, stop being so dramatic. We live together. What is yours is mine." We pulled into our driveway. I turned off the engine, unbuckled my seatbelt, and turned to face her directly. "How did you pay for the international flights?" She avoided my eyes. "I put them on your Amex. It was $10,000 for the first-class tickets. I figured it could be your contribution to the move since my new company isn't paying for relocation." I didn't yell. I didn't scream. That is the thing about my profession. When things go wrong, the forensic accountant in my brain takes over. Emotion shuts down. Cold, hard logic boots up. We walked inside the house. I immediately walked straight into my home office, logged into my American Express account, and there it was. 2 pending charges for France, totaling exactly $10,400. She stood in the doorway, leaning against a frame, watching me. "You will get over it. You always get over it. We are leaving on Thursday. You need to start packing." "I am not going anywhere," I said, staring at the screen. "Fine," she yelled, her face turning red. "Stay here in your boring little life. But I need you to transfer $20,000 into our joint account by tomorrow morning for the moving expenses and the flat deposit." I looked at her, entirely bewildered. No, Monday morning, the really dirty tricks began. She realized I was not budging, so she tried to force my hand. I was at my desk at the accounting firm when my boss called me into his office. He looked incredibly confused. "I just got off the phone with your fiancée," my boss said slowly, tapping his pen on his desk. "She asked me about the logistics of cashing out your unused PTO and rolling over your 401k because you are resigning this week to move to Europe." My jaw locked. She had actually called my employer, pretending we were engaged, to try and finalize my resignation for me. She calculated that if I suddenly lost my job, I would have no choice but to rely on her and move. "I am not resigning," I told my boss. I explained the situation as briefly and professionally as I could. He shook his head, looking disgusted, and immediately told our HR department to flag any outside calls regarding my employment status. When I got home that evening, the house was quiet. She was out. I walked into the living room and immediately noticed my guitar collection was missing from the corner stand. 2 vintage Fender Stratocasters. I called her. She answered on the second ring. "Where are my guitars?" I asked. "I sold them on Facebook Marketplace to a guy this morning," she said, sounding incredibly smug. "$4,000 cash. Since you stubbornly refused to transfer the moving money, I had to take matters into my own hands. Consider it a down payment on the life you are actively trying to ruin." She had stolen and fenced my personal property. The entitlement wasn't just toxic anymore. It had crossed the line into actual criminality. I didn't confront her further on the phone. I just hung up, walked into my office, and locked the door behind me. I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with. If she was brazen enough to sell my property, charge 10 grand to my credit card, and forge my signature on a foreign lease, what else had she done? I opened my laptop and ran a comprehensive free bureau credit report on myself. And there it was. TransUnion showed a hard inquiry from exactly 3 weeks ago. It was from a private, notoriously high-interest personal loan company. I called the company immediately, navigating through their automated system until I finally reached a fraud specialist. I gave them my social security number. They confirmed an active, disbursed loan account for $25,000. Can you tell me the disbursement account? I asked, my voice deadly calm. The agent verified the last 4 digits of the routing and account number. It was my girlfriend's personal checking account, not our joint account. Pays a loan. I did not authorize this loan. I told the agent clearly. My identity was stolen. I need you to freeze this account immediately. The agent informed me that to initiate a formal fraud investigation, I would need to provide an FTC identity theft report and an official police case number. I thanked them and hung up. The interconnected pieces of her insane puzzle finally clicked into place. Why Paris? Why the sudden, manic rush? Why the desperate need to lock me into a foreign lease and demand $20,000 in cash? I went into the filing cabinet in the guest room where she kept her mail. She was always weirdly possessive of it, but now I did not care. I used a small screwdriver to pop the flimsy lock on her drawer. Inside was a massive stack of final notice bills. Credit cards, department store cards, personal lines of credit. I ran a quick calculation. She was nearly $70,000 in debt. Paris was never a career move. It was an escape pod. She had secured a lateral job move in France, forged my signature to secure an apartment lease using my Stellar credit, maxed out a fraudulent $25,000 loan in my name 3 weeks ago to pay off a most aggressive, threatening debt collectors, and buy herself a brand new designer wardrobe for her Paris aesthetic. But the loan money ran out, which is why she needed me to transfer 20 grand for the actual move, and why she sold my guitar for quick cash when I refused. She planned to trap me in Europe, completely relying on my stable income to keep her afloat while she happily ignored the massive financial crater she left behind in the States. She was trying to use me as a human shield against the consequences of her own horrific financial choices. Tuesday morning, I took the day off work. While she was out at a farewell brunch with her oblivious friends, bragging about her romantic European adventure, I went to work. First, I filed the official FTC report online. Then, I gathered all my evidence. The loan documents, my credit report, the MX statement, and the Facebook Marketplace messages about the guitars I managed to pull from her iPad that was synced to her phone. I drove to the local police precinct. I sat down with a financial crimes detective for 2 hours. Under 18 U.S.C. Section 1028, identity theft involving loan fraud is a severe federal offense. The detective took my statement, categorized the entire situation as felony fraud and grand theft, and handed me a physical case card with a report number. Next, I sat in my car and called American Express. I reported the $10,400 charge as fraudulent. Under the Fair Credit Billing Act, my liability was zero. I explicitly told the fraud department that my card was compromised by a household member without my knowledge or consent. Amex instantly canceled the card, removed the charges from my balance, and initiated a hostile chargeback directly to Air France. Finally, I went home and hired a certified French translator online for a 1-hour consultation. Together, we drafted a formal legal email to the Parisian real estate agency. I attached a scan of my passport and the police report, explicitly stating that my signature on their lease was forged. I was not moving to France, and any financial guarantee attached to my name was entirely fraudulent and legally void. Wednesday was quiet. She spent the entire day packing her belongings. Every piece of clothing, every bottle of expensive perfume she had bought with the loan money she stole in my name. She packed it all neatly into 4 massive, brand-new designer suitcases. Thursday morning arrived. Flight day. She walked down the stairs, dressed in an incredibly chic, effortless airport outfit. A beige trench coat, oversized sunglasses, an expensive leather tote bag. She looked around the empty living room. "Where are your bags?" she asked. A tiny hint of genuine panic finally broke through her smug exterior. "I already put them in the trunk." I lied smoothly. "I packed last night while you were sleeping." She let out a dramatic, theatrical sigh of relief. I knew you would finally come to your senses. You just needed to be pushed out of your boring comfort zone. Something like that, I said, grabbing my car keys. Let's go. Traffic on the interstate is going to be heavy. I carried her 4 massive suitcases out to the car and loaded them into the trunk. The drive to the airport was totally surreal. She spent the entire 45 minutes talking a mile a minute about the street cafes we would visit, the vintage furniture we needed to buy for the flat, and how my boss would eventually beg me to come back as a highly paid consultant. She was completely disconnected from reality, floating on a temporary cloud of absolute entitlement and stolen money. I pulled up to the Delta Departures curb at the International Terminal. I put the car in park, popped the trunk, and got out into the noisy airport air. I hauled her 4 heavy suitcases onto the concrete curb. The sky was overcast, and the roar of the jet engines overhead was deafening. She stepped out to the passenger side, adjusting her expensive coat. She looked at the trunk of my SUV. It was empty. "Wait," she said, her eyebrows knitting together in confusion. "Where are your bags?" I closed the trunk with a solid thud. I leaned against the back of my car and pulled a thick manila envelope from my jacket pocket. I handed it to her. "What is this?" she asked, looking at the envelope like it was covered in venom. "That is your reality check," I said. She opened the envelope. The first page was an email from Parisian real estate agency, translated into English. It confirmed the immediate cancellation of the lease due to fraudulent application and stated in no uncertain terms that they would not be refunding the initial deposit. The color instantly drained from her face. You canceled the flat? Where am I supposed to live?" "Keep reading," I said, crossing my arms. She flipped the page with trembling fingers. It was the official police report detailing the grand theft of my vintage guitars and the felony identity theft regarding the $25,000 personal loan. Her hands started to shake violently. Her oversized sunglasses slid down the bridge of her nose. "You went to the police?" she whispered, her voice cracking. "Over a loan? We are partners." "We were partners," I corrected her, my voice hard. "You are a thief. The loan company has frozen your bank account pending a criminal investigation. The funds you tried to steal are gone." "But the tickets—" she stammered, frantically looking toward the sliding glass terminal doors as if the plane was going to leave without her. "Oh, MX processed a fraud chargeback yesterday afternoon," I said, casually checking my watch. "Air France canceled both tickets. You do not have a flight. You do not have an apartment in Paris. And you do not have 25 grand in stolen money." "You cannot do this to me," she screamed, dropping the envelope. The papers scattered across the dirty sidewalk. "I have a job waiting for me. I told everyone I was leaving. What am I supposed to do?" "I highly suggest you call an Uber," I said, walking around her and getting back into the driver's seat. I rolled down the window to look at her one last time. She was standing amidst her 4 designer suitcases, completely surrounded by the physical proof of her own deceit, looking totally panicked. "Bon voyage," I said. I rolled up the window, put the car in drive, and merged smoothly back into the busy airport traffic. In my rearview mirror, I watched her frantically yelling at an airport security guard who was telling her she had to move her bag from the active loading zone. The legal fallout took several long, exhausting months. The police ultimately issued a warrant for her arrest regarding the loan fraud, and she was detained 2 weeks later trying to crash on a friend's couch in the next state over. She had the absolute audacity to try and sue me in civil court for emotional distress and breach of verbal contract, but the judge literally laughed and threw it out the moment my lawyer presented the police report and the forged lease documents. She was eventually forced to plead guilty to a lesser charge of fraud to avoid prison time, resulting in heavy probation and mandatory financial restitution to me for the guitars she fenced.